Good morning, Dawg Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Breda Pest Management. Busy today. I tell you, Davin Bellamy online has been all over some needed improvements for the Georgia defense. We have the great privilege today of talking to him about that. Georgia also getting ready for Kentucky on Saturday. We'll talk to Mike Griffith about that, kind of turning the page to the next game in that portion of our discussion. A couple of interesting things on the internet the last 24 hours as it relates to Georgia, coming from some of the most prominent voices out there, including one former Georgia great with some, perhaps, depending on your perspective, dire words here about what might be coming next for UGA. So we'll cover it all. We'll talk about what needs to happen for Georgia to get back on track and do what it did a year ago, shake off a loss to Alabama, and remain in contention for the national championship and actually winning the SEC championship. How can they do that again this year? We're going to talk a lot about that today. We are glad that you are with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Breda Pest Management, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Breda Pest Management. They handle bugs and critters.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So very busy show for us. Coming up a little bit later on, I tell you, the terrific former Dawg Davin Bellamy has had some very interesting things to say online about kind of what the Georgia defense needs to do to get back on track after obviously what happened on Saturday. So we are going to break down some of that with Davin here before we're done today. It's always great to have Davin Bellamy on the show. I think today it's even better than normal because Davin obviously has some expertise and a lot to say about a very hot topic coming off of Saturday's game. Also in the last 24 hours or so, we have gotten something that we very rarely get, which is a current SEC coach kind of shooting from the hip about a game that he was not involved with. We got that yesterday when it comes to Lane Kiffin on the subject of Georgia and Alabama. Kiffin was on with Kirk Herbstreit. I think my read on this is slightly different than some other people seem to be, but I think I'm probably right. So we'll give this to you coming up in just a couple of minutes. More interesting fallout and feedback from the Georgia game against Alabama on Saturday, and in particular, that sequence near the end of the game on offense that everybody seems to be talking about, Lane Kiffin included. That's coming up here in a couple of minutes. Prior to that, though, let me begin this way. I say this a lot. It's worth repeating again, that most college football fans go to the stadium or tune in to watch on TV, and they do so with the hope that they may see their team win. That is what normal life is like for most college football fans. Even very good SEC teams or very good teams across the country, most fans show up on Saturday hoping that their team is going to win. Georgia, for much of this decade, dating back to 2021, has just lived in a very different kind of orbit than that, where Georgia fans showed up at the stadium or tuned in to watch on TV with the near certainty that their team would win. And because sports fans like to talk about sports, like to debate sports, like to argue about it, the discussion was always going to center around not whether Georgia would win, but how Georgia would win. Would it win with some flair, some panache? Would it flex? Would it send a message? Would it completely annihilate and throttle its opponent? Oftentimes it did. But that's what became the standard. Not would you win, but how much entertainment can I derive by your win? That's what Georgia football has mostly been for the last few years. We have slowly become aware, really dating back to about a year ago when Georgia lost against Alabama, that era for Georgia is over. It doesn't mean that Georgia's chance of winning a national championship has completely gone away or that Georgia can no longer be a great team. But Georgia, as I told you almost exactly a year ago, is no longer the dominant program it once was. And for all of us in our own way that like following Georgia football, that like talking about Georgia football, we have had to make peace with some of that we are now like the rest of college football fans. We go into college football games hoping our team will win, hoping for the best, probably needing some good luck, probably needing a break or two. That's what Georgia is, a lot more like the rest of the country than, frankly, a lot of us are probably comfortable with, because you get a certain degree of hubris when you see your team win, as much as we've seen ours win. It's interesting to note that the terrific former Georgia Dawg, one of the all-time greats in this program, he is on my personal Mount Rushmore for Georgia. David Pollack, who has his own show, it's called See Ball, Get Ball. David this week essentially made that same point, that for now, and once again, another game against Alabama stands as sharp proof of this, is that Georgia is not what it once was. And David said, for fans who've gotten used to seeing Georgia be a certain kind of way, this probably does take some getting used to, but this is the reality, the facts on the ground for Georgia here right now as it prepares for Kentucky on Saturday. This is what David Pollack said about that.
If you're watching Georgia and you're a Georgia fan and you're frustrated, I get it. I understand it. But you also won back-to-back championships too. And that has to be really fun. You have to enjoy that. You can't just say, man, this sucks, because you also won the SEC championship last year and you weren't excited, which I get. Like, success puts you in a different category. I get that. But I'll say this, with this roster, it's a new look Georgia team. And you know, Brent asked the question, is Georgia a lock to make the college football playoff? Like, Brent, no, they're not a lock. Like, they're not a lock to make the playoff.
So that's David Pollack saying, no, they are now not a lock to make the playoff. He would go on to say that he thinks, just based on a question that was posed to him, the Brent there is his co-host, Brent Rollins, that it's more likely that Georgia goes 8-4 than 10-2. 10-2 would get you probably in the playoff. 8-4 obviously would not, even against a difficult schedule. David thinks a 3 or a 4-loss season is more likely right now than a 10-2 season might be, saying they are not a lock for the playoff. That's what matters from David's clip there. I want to come back to that. Let me, though, defend Georgia fans here just for a moment. And I'm always going to do this. What David is alluding to, and listen, I am the world's biggest David Pollack fan. You cannot be a bigger David Pollack fan than I am, both in terms of the way he carries himself. I think his football analysis is sharp. You can't be a bigger fan of David Pollack than I am. And yet I vehemently disagree with the insinuation, if that's what that was, that Georgia fans are spoiled. I simply don't believe that. I really don't. David says that Georgia fans weren't excited about winning the SEC last year. I think the Georgia fans were disappointed about losing to Notre Dame, because that's below the standard that Georgia fans have come to expect. But I can tell you, as someone who was in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, Georgia fans were very excited about winning last year's SEC. I think our post-game show that night reflected that. We were there on the scene. We're gathering up that confetti and collecting it and keeping it the same way we would have for a national championship. That game just felt different than a typical SEC title game because of everything that Georgia went through last year. So as someone who is in it with Georgia fans, I'm telling you right now, there was a sense of appreciation for winning last year's SEC, for the fact that Georgia did shake off whatever weirdness was going on last season, that they shook it off and still found a way to win that game. As someone who eyewitnessed it, there was plenty of excitement about that. And whatever Georgia fans are going through right now is not about being spoiled, because I don't believe the Georgia fans are spoiled. I'm not going to get too deep into this right now, but I don't believe that Georgia fans are spoiled. I think that change is hard for anybody in any situation, and change can be jarring. And what you're watching before your eyes is things are changing. And I think that some Georgia fans are curious of, well, how well is Georgia adapting to this change, realizing that it's not quite as dominant as it once was, and so therefore it can't expect to just go out and weather adversity the way that it did in the past, because it doesn't quite have the same strength within the program to do that the way that it maybe did in the past. I think some Georgia fans are rightly asking that question, but the frustration that you see coming off the game against Alabama, my loyalty always lies with the fans, more so than anybody else. Any one man or any one thing, my loyalty lies with fans, and I don't think what you're seeing right now is coming from a place of these Georgia fans are entitled or spoiled or whatever else. I think that's an easy thing to go to for certain people, not David Pollack, but others. I think that's an easy thing to go to because fans will always be a relatively soft target. They can't really fight back, but they don't have a platform to do so. But in this particular case, it's important for me then to use my platform to defend them. I do not believe the Georgia fans are spoiled. But nonetheless, the most important thing that David says there is the idea it's not obvious this team's going to make the college football playoff. And right now, to use bad grammar, it ain't. It ain't obvious that Georgia's going to make the college football playoff. That I go in, and we're going to talk a lot more about this in the next couple of days, the game against Kentucky on Saturday, my big thought about the game, my big hope for the game is I hope Georgia wins. I do. We are now in the category of other college football fan bases where even in games in which Georgia's favored, and there'll be plenty of them that there are, perhaps all of the rest of the games, but nonetheless, we go into games now hoping that Georgia wins and knowing some breaks have got to happen for you, probably for that to happen just like any other college team. That Georgia just isn't as dominant as it once was. And I think one of the things that we circle as the biggest reason why coming off of Saturday was you could really count on the Georgia defense to show up, to be great compared to its own standard. Well, now, at least statistically speaking, it's not even great compared to the typical college football standard. Georgia is not an upper-tier defense, statistically speaking, right now. It has no pass rush to speak of whatsoever, and as you know, on Saturday, that resulted in a situation where Alabama was able to feast on third down, essentially setting a record for itself as a program, for Georgia as a program in terms of third downs converted, third downs allowed, just a real mess defensively. And on Monday, rare media appearance for Kirby Smart these days, he spoke about what happened for Georgia there on that third down and how the pass rush perhaps impacted all that. This is Kirby Smart.
Yeah, it was a great balance. I mean, that's the part of the game that you look back on and I go, you know what? We executed at a high level. Like, we did not have a lack of execution on third down. We had one where we checked and they checked and we checked and they checked and we didn't quite get lined up right. But it was a front issue, not a coverage issue. And when you play in the home environment, you go back and say, okay, is there a lack of execution? No, there wasn't a lack of execution. There was really good execution in a high-level quarterback play. Give him a lot of credit. Shake his hand and say he did a great job. The ball came out before some of our rush got there. One time we didn't have our rush lanes right. Quarterback took off the first third down of the game. You know, it's like you can't let them do that. You got to execute better in those situations. But some of it was really good quarterback play, really good timing, and give them credit, shake their hand, and go get better for the next one. So we got to find ways to affect the quarterback, but we had some in there that we executed and they out-executed.
So a couple of things on what Kirby Smart says there, and I think I said this yesterday. In fact, I know that I did. I thought that Ty Simpson's presence in this game was jarring. This was a guy that we think of as sort of a program guy. He's hung around. He was patient. He waited his turn. And oftentimes when a guy stays around that long, you assume he must be damaged goods. There must be a reason that he hasn't emerged as the starting quarterback before now, that he just wasn't that attractive of a prospect. But on Saturday, to me, he looked like any other recent Alabama starting quarterback, all of which, for the most part, have NFL prospects once their college career is done. That's what Ty Simpson looked like. And as I said, the big arm, the big presence, the confidence, he just looked like a very good quarterback, and he looked like what Alabama always seems to have, a quarterback that's just in control of the game, in command of the game, especially playing against Georgia, because oftentimes Jalen Milroe looked better against Georgia than other teams that he would have played. Alabama always seems to have quarterback figured out in the games against Georgia. Hard not to notice that. So as much as it pains me to admit, you know, I thought their guy was just a program guy. I thought their guy was just their best option at quarterback. That's the guy they were forced to turn to. But as it turns out, Ty Simpson seems to be a lot more than that. I do think you've got to give him credit for that, and you'll add that to the list of things maybe over the years that I've been wrong about. But on the pass rush part of this for Georgia, and this is also something that David Pollack at least alluded to if you'll watch the full show, the C-Ball, Get Ball podcast. I think they do a great job. If you'll watch the full podcast, you'll see some of this also come up there. The fact that Georgia doesn't really have this aspect of the game figured out right now. And listen, with all due respect to Kirby, I think the absence of pass rush for Georgia is getting a little harder to explain away. It's one thing to say, hey, their quarterback really executed. On Saturday, he did. It's another thing to say, when we play teams, they always get rid of the ball quickly. I mean, I think you can measure that. That's measurably true. but you can't go through a full season without ever impacting the quarterback. And right now, we are a third of the way through the regular season, and Georgia is not really impacting quarterbacks at all. Now, Kirby Smart just used a lot of words to explain why that's not maybe as true as it seems. He clearly knows more than I do, but I don't know that extra words add clarity to what we're seeing with our own eyes. Georgia's just not doing this. And the fear that I would have as a Georgia fan who speaks to other Georgia fans every single day is the reason why Georgia doesn't have pass rush is it because they don't have pass rushers. That's what I'd be concerned about. There's a guy named Grant Hughes writing a story 24/7 Sports looking at what he calls the biggest portal regrets for teams over the offseason. Perhaps not surprisingly, Georgia gets mentioned here. The regret that the 24/7 Sports writer discusses is the fact that Georgia has allowed Damon Wilson to leave, go to Missouri for what we presume to be a big NIL deal. And certainly in the early stages here, Wilson's having great success in Missouri. Georgia does not seem to have had the same level of success at replacing the productivity that Wilson potentially could have provided. Let me read this off my phone here from 24/7 Sports. Hughes says, the Georgia's pass rush has been virtually non-existent this season. Listen to this. Ranking 125th out of 136 teams in sacks per game with just 0.7 sacks per game. And they're 128th nationally in pressure rate at just 2.04%. By contrast, former Bulldogs edge rusher Damon Wilson has excelled at Missouri. He's second to Power 4 with 22 pressures, and he's recorded 3 sacks in just 92 pass rush snaps. He says the 19 Georgia defensive linemen who played at least one snap this fall have collectively generated only 12 pressures through 4 games. Those are jarring numbers, and we said this going into Friday, on Friday's show going into the game on Saturday, that if there's anything to be said about the full and final outcome of the game for Georgia, it may be a referendum on how Georgia's chosen to spend its money on talent as much as anything else. We're led to believe, based on published reports, that Georgia, while not the biggest spending team in college football, is among the biggest. It certainly does not seem to have gone on the cheap to put this roster together. But I think you're left to wonder, is the money in the right places if Georgia's generating so little pass rush and a guy that walked out the door is having great success thus far for Missouri, albeit against a much softer schedule for the Tigers than what Georgia's played so far. That is certainly worth bringing up. It's an important addendum to mention here. But what is not in any way able to be parsed or mitigated is the fact that Georgia just isn't getting to quarterbacks. And in the absence of Damon Wilson's departure, the big Georgia add in the transfer portal at that position was Elo Modozie coming from Army. There was all kinds of offseason hype for Modozie. You'll notice that we, for the most part, ignored that. We like hyping up Georgia players. We like good things being said about Georgia players, and we think there's plenty to like about Modozie. But there was a certain, I would say, astroturfing nature to the way that some of the Modozie stuff was broadcast all over the internet back during the summer that made us just a little bit suspicious. So we mostly sidestepped that. We still think he's an important part of the Georgia team. We're glad that Georgia has him. You haven't seen maybe the best of Elo Modozie yet. The big transfer portal ad that in some respects is at least a replacement for Damon Wilson. Kirby Smart on Monday also talked about what maybe Modozie's role is right now and where he is in his development, playing at a very different level now than he did a year ago at the United States Military Academy. This is Kirby Smart again on that.
He's getting better each and every week. He's a guy that, was not here for spring like our other guys, and he continues to grow and get better. His greatest attribute is his speed and his athleticism. We got to be able to use that more and give Q some rest and continue to develop him. I think he knows that, and we got to find ways to get his skill set out there on the field.
Yeah, so, to me, the overall bottom line is I would take the words of David Pollack pretty seriously when he looks ahead to this future Georgia schedule and sees the potential for losses. A game like Auburn on the road, we expect it to be a raucous environment. Auburn just played 2 consecutive road games in tough conditions, and while it didn't win either of those games, it was competitive in both. I would take them pretty seriously because of that. Right now, Ole Miss looks like maybe the best team in the SEC, at least the way they've played over the course of the last season's worth of games, stretching over the the part of 2 seasons. By the way, more on Lane Kiffin in a moment. That game seems much tougher. Mississippi State's a better team than in reality than they were on paper to begin the season. There really is almost no easy game remaining for Georgia the rest of the way. Given the way that Georgia typically plays against Kentucky, I would include the Wildcats in that discussion too. Georgia's going to have to improve if it's going to produce the record that Georgia and its fans are used to seeing the Bulldogs have. And the biggest place for that improvement to take place, I believe, is on the defense, with the pass rush in particular. Georgia's got to make it a little easier on itself, getting in the backfield, impacting quarterbacks, at least hurrying them. That's one of the things that Davin Bellamy said online this week. We'll talk to him more about that in a moment. Even if you don't get the quarterback on the ground, can you at least get him off his timing? Can you at least get him off his platform? Can you at least make him uncomfortable? Right now, we're led to believe that Georgia might not even really be doing that all that much. So this is a critical time for Georgia. It's a good week to show that improvement against Kentucky, and every Georgia fan within the sound of my voice right now is certainly hopeful that that will be the case. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented today by Breda Pest Management, and we're glad you're with us. Whether it's live on video at 10 a.m., of course, thrilled to have you there for that. Radio, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. Had to have my interview this morning with the friends at 960 Ref cut a little bit short. Talking to a microphone for me is no big deal right now. I'm still very, very... It's hard for me to talk on the phone, even in my private life. The voice issues that I've been dealing with have made it hard to talk on the phone. So I'm still not quite normal on the phone, although I think I'm probably sounding a little bit better on the air here. At least I hope I do. Seems like it might be the case. Of course, podcast, Apple, Spotify, everything else. We're just really happy to have you as a part of the program here today. And a big thanks to our friends at Breda Pest Management who make it all possible for you there as well. We love Breda Pest Management because in a time in which, listen, everybody needs as much money in their pocket as they can get, what you can do to save money, we think is a really valuable thing. That's where our folks at Breda Pest Management come in on all of this. They are going to be your pest control solution for your termites, bugs, critters, everything else. And because of the legacy of success that they put together now, a multiple generation company dating back to 1975, that legacy gives them a chance to leverage for your benefit their strength as an organization, putting more money back in your pocket for making the switch. So you've got to have termite protection as a homeowner, you know that. And the company that you're working with, there's a very good chance they're charging you too much money for a level of service that's not quite what you deserve anyway. Well, Brady's going to solve both those problems for you. They're going to give you better service for a better price. Who wouldn't want to make the switch when it comes to that? So find them online. It's BredaPest.com. B-R-E-D-A. That's BredaPest.com. One more time. B-R-E-D-A. BredaPest.com. We love having Breda Pest Management as a part of our show because we love the service they provide to Georgia fans and sports fans all across our state. So check out Breda Pest Management here today. All right, let me do a programming note before we move on with the rest of the show here. I do want to remind you, we have a contest ongoing at DawgNation right now. Let me take a moment to make you aware of that. Our friends at Cerchero's providing this. So you know that Cerchero's is a big part of what we do here at Game Day around DawgNation, and they want to be a big part of your game day too. Whether it's a tailgate party, they're at the stadium, or a watch party at home. In fact, as a way of giving you a taste of what they're all about, they're offering someone to be a lucky winner of what we're calling the Ultimate Game Day easy for me to say, I swear. Ultimate Game Day Party, courtesy of Cerchero's. Someone's going to win a $200 gift card to enjoy the fresh mix of Cerchero's as a part of your big game watching event. So if you go to DawgNation.com/tailgate, you can register for your chance to win on this right now. And the reason why we're telling you about this now is because you've only got between now and October 6th to register for your chance. So if you want food freshly prepared just for you, I'm talking about the taco, the fajita bars, the platters, all the stuff that you can possibly get there for that, the $200 gift card to spend on it to get it. The best way to do that right now, register for your chance to win online, DawgNation.com/tailgate. That's DawgNation.com/tailgate. Do it before October 6th. The Ultimate game day party giveaway, courtesy of our friends at Search Arrows. Good luck to you on that. And don't forget, if you're getting ready for the big one coming up this Saturday, watching at home, hanging out there in Athens, great catering options for you there at Search Arrows. They got 40 locations stretched across your state. The Southeast are also growing by leaps and bounds. It's delicious food. I love it. Fresh Mex is what they're famous for. All the great stuff. If you go in store, of course, you know how they take care of you. Go through the line. They'll grill your veggies up fresh. All the stuff ready-made, ready to go just for you. Really great care taken by the friendly folks at Search Arrows. So make sure you check that out today online, searcharrows.com, or to register for your chance to win the ultimate game day party. How about DawgNation.com/tailgate for more on that? Okay, so as I told you, Davin Bellamy later on, more on Georgia, Kentucky coming up with Mike here in a moment. Prior to that, though, let's go around the doghouse. And it's presented today by our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau. Now, there was a very interesting thing on the internet yesterday. Interesting because we just don't get this very much. Sometimes if you catch a coach in a casual moment when they're relaxed, they will speak off the cuff in a way they don't typically do. We got some of that from Lane Kiffin, who was a guest on, I guess, Kirk Herbstreit's podcast that he does with Joey Galloway. And the subject that came up was what happened in that, as we've debated now endless times, the fourth down sequence for Georgia, the Gunnar Stockton run, and then the Cash Jones run that was stuffed by L.T. Overton after the whiffed block by Juan Gaston. What exactly happened on that sequence? We got some very interesting stuff yesterday from Lane Kiffin, the Ole Miss coach, on with Kirk Herbstreit about this. And my suspicion is, and oftentimes if I'm on an island, that means I'm wrong, but my suspicion is, I think my read on this is a little bit different from some of what I'm seeing online in other places. A lot of people seem to think that everything that Lane says here is a total validation of Kirby Smart's decision-making process. I have to say that's not quite the way that I get this. Let me start with the part that seems to be in line with Kirby's thinking. So this is two clips from Lane. I'm actually playing them out of order. I'm playing the second one first, and we'll play the first one second. And this is the one where it seems like what Lane Kiffin says that he and other coaches that he's been taught by, dating back to Nick Saban, what they do is very similar to what Georgia said it did with a sequence of plays on Saturday, knowing if we do this on third down, that we're going to immediately quickly go to the line and do this on fourth down, which ultimately ended up being the handoff to Cash Jones. Here's what Lane Kiffin said with Kirk Herbstreit they do as it relates to these moments in the game, and if it's late, if it's third down, fourth down, you know, what we're going to do, the play we're going to call, how they try to accelerate that decision-making. If you like football, at the very least, this is just a very interesting look into what coaches are actually thinking. I think it's really candid from Lane. If for no other reason than it's just interesting, it's worth your time. This is Lane Kiffin.
Here's the thing, and this is actually a thing with when I got to Coach Saban that we would have to go through and figure out. When you go really fast, like what Kirby eventually did there, he had to make the decision what to do, and then he must have told it to the coordinator, and the coordinator said, okay, run, gas, whatever, you know,
Yep.
put everybody into the boundary, run the zone play. And Coach Saban used to talk a lot about, like, there's two philosophies there, and you can go big and you can go slower, and then you can get the right looks because you have time to check and go away from different looks. Mm-hmm. But you also got to block a lot of people when you do that. When you go fast like that and you give exotic formations and everybody's got to run into the boundary, you screw the defense up more, but you're also not going to be able to get the perfect look sometimes because everything's so fast and you're just snapping the ball. And sometimes the right tackle might get beat. So, there's give and take to those two things.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And, and I think most people now, you know, we really have those. We spend a ton of time on fourth downs and in practice. And so between Charlie Weiss and I, like, it's ordered exactly. So when that 4th and 1 or that 4th and 2, even on the hash, that's all figured out in advance. And so we try to go really fast in those situations. And I try to tell him before, you know, it might be 3rd and 3 and say, hey, if it's 4th and 1 or 4th and 2, we're going to this play or that play. If it's 4th and 3 or more, we're going to kick the field goal. So that way there's no conversation.
It's just immediate.
Marked. It's not like, okay, let's go. And then.
So I think that's really interesting from Lane Kiffin. And while most of that sounds very closely aligned with what Kirby Smart himself said about the game on Saturday and the ultimate stuff on the fourth down with Cash Jones, the one thing that Kiffin at least alludes to there that I think is worth considering, and we said this yesterday, that, okay, well, the play supposedly got blown up because Juan Gaston whiffed on a block. People are aware of that. The suggestion we've made, though, is even though that Georgia got an advantageous formation by putting the tight end, the three receivers on the left side, moved the entire Alabama defense to that side, there was acreage on what you call the field side there for Georgia, where it seems like Cash Jones, with his speed, could have easily run to the end zone. But is it possible, we've asked, that Juan Gaston, who's a giant, inexperienced, and also dealing with an injured ankle, that by trying to go so fast, it made it more likely that he might whiff on a block, because the same way that you're trying to catch the defense not quite set, maybe Juan Gaston himself didn't have a chance to get set. I think it's at least worth considering that as a possibility, and Kiffin at least alludes to that, whether he meant to or not. But the part that I feel like I caught from Kiffin yesterday that I don't know that others have noticed from this clip quite as much, or at least I'm not hearing as much about it, is this notion that, Kirby would say they were locked in to the Cash Jones running play on fourth down because they had to send that in as a sequence. Hoping to go fast, you had to know that you're doing this on third down, and immediately you're having to do that on fourth down. They're having to sequence and then, therefore, I guess, package those plays together. But as Lane Kiffin said yesterday, that's not something as a play-calling mind that he does with his team. And I don't know that he knew that Kirby Smart had said what he said. And one of the reasons why I have some reason to believe that is because if you look at the way this was originally packaged online when Kirk Herbstreit put it out, it was Lane Kiffin comments on Georgia and Alabama, which is a pretty good headline. If somebody writes a headline every day, that's a pretty good headline, would have gotten a lot of attention. That tweet was eventually deleted, and it was changed to, and many of you probably saw this, it was changed to something a lot softer and something that wasn't quite as grabby. I don't think coaches like the idea of commenting on other coaches, especially in the case of Lane and Kirby, because we know that they are friends. I don't think that Kiffin probably knew what Kirby had said about the package of plays and the sequencing and how that led to the Cash Jones play. I don't think that Lane would have ever intentionally second-guessed Kirby on this, but without meaning to, I believe, at least in some form or fashion, he probably did. At least that's my read on it. Judge for yourself. Here is what Lane Kiffin says about whether or not, as a play-calling coach, they sequence and package plays together in this moment. Here's Lane Kiffin.
Yeah, I think you got a lot to unpack there. One, I don't know what other people do. The ages of the two plays thing is gone to me, because that wouldn't make any sense, because you can tell the quarterback now.
Tell that's
the quarterback. And most people now have nailed like their signaling operation to the players. Where old school we used to huddle, and John Gruden would give Joey Galloway a play with 14 words in it and all that stuff. So fast and done that I don't think the two play fits anymore.
So, I don't mind telling you that, there's a certain portion of that that's just over my head, and I won't pretend otherwise on that. But you can't help but notice, I think part of the reason that people miss this is because the way that the Zoom works is that when Herbstreit speaks, Kiffin's mic goes muted. And so when Herbstreit affirms and reacts to something that Kiffin is saying, we then stop hearing Lane Kiffin. But I think it's fairly obvious that what Kiffin was saying there, although his mic got muted, is that you don't have to package plays together anymore because you have helmet comms, communication inside the helmet, and you can tell the quarterback after every play and ahead of the next play what you want to do. So the idea that Georgia had to be locked into the Cash Jones play on fourth down, as I'm hearing Lane Kiffin say that does not sound like that's necessarily the case, that they would have had the freedom to do something different on fourth down if they wanted to. What seems true is that Georgia didn't want to. That Georgia thought that was the winning play. And on that point, we're going to respectfully disagree. But either way, interesting stuff from Lane Kiffin without meaning to, maybe giving some analysis of what happened for Georgia in that sequence and as a play calling mind himself, how he would handle those things. He may have gotten sort of tricked into doing it, but he did it nonetheless. And that's Around the Doghouse, presented today by our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau. Now, we love Georgians, and we know that Georgians are hurting here today after the big loss, of course, to Alabama on Saturday. But listen, when it comes to the great stuff of Georgia Farm Bureau, they know the way that Georgians feel on a regular basis because they are Georgians just like you, living all across our great state. So when it comes to the great things, whether it's the apples grown up in North Georgia or the produce and cattle that get raised, middle Georgia, South Georgia, and everything else, that is what Georgia Farm Bureau is all about. Grassroots efforts that strengthen our communities, that support our agriculture, that take pride in the fact that the food that we raise and grow here in Georgia is on the plates of folks across our country and around our world. And one of the great ways they show support on all that is with your insurance needs. You got to have auto insurance, you got to have home insurance, you got to have these sorts of things, and that's what Georgia Farm Bureau is all about. They're always the home team. That means when Georgia fans are hurting, the folks at Georgia Farm Bureau, they're hurting right there with you after a tough loss. And if we're celebrating again on Saturday, well, they'll be doing some celebrating too. So that's what Georgia Farm Bureau is all about. So give them a call, 877-404-1050. That's 877-404-1050, or online, gfbinsurance.com. One more time, that's gfbinsurance.com. Georgia Farm Bureau is always the home team. All right, Davin Bellamy later on. More now on Georgia turning the page for Kentucky. Let's talk to Mike Griffith here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Oh, Lord, Mike, we are hurting here this week, licking our wounds in every way imaginable. Now I got to try to turn the page against Kentucky. Historically, this is not a team that Georgia plays particularly well against. I think a lot of that is usually about when the game is played, usually before a bye, oftentimes late in the season. I think some of that explains that. But nonetheless, not the easiest of opponents for Georgia to get right against or get well against. How easy do you think it's going to be this Saturday for Georgia to turn the page for Kentucky?
Real easy. Easiest game next to Charlotte, left on the schedule. I mean, this Kentucky team has a real shaky quarterback situation. They imploded against South Carolina. They've had special teams miscues. The coach is on a hot seat. Not a whole lot to play for Kentucky on the road. Yeah, they like to run the ball. Georgia likes to run the ball, but you couldn't ask for a better opponent than Kentucky in terms of SEC opponents. I think they're the worst team in the league by far.
Well, I don't dispute that Kentucky's not a very good team, but I've also seen bad Kentucky teams play inexplicably close with Georgia a lot in the past. I at least have to take that history seriously. So while it's among the, on paper anyway, easier games that Georgia has remaining, especially with Mississippi State being far better than folks thought they were going to be, I don't dispute that this is among Georgia's easiest games on paper. I just don't quite know that that necessarily translates to actually being easy.
Well, that's up to Kirby. I mean, he made Austin Peay look like a good football team. They were 1 yard from being tied, within one score of Georgia in the fourth quarter. If they score a touchdown from the one, it's a one-score game with the FCS team. So it's up to Kirby and how aggressively he play calls and how many opportunities, he takes downfield and the type of game that he wants to play. This is, Kirby has a certain style. Now, Brandon, the concern and the trend that's come out that I think no one can debate. I did the numbers. Georgia has trailed in the last 8 games against Power 4 opponents, all the way back to the Texas game last year. That's the last time Georgia led a game from wire to wire. And even more alarming, in 6 of the last 8 games against Power 4 conference teams, the other team scored the first touchdown. So to me, something's broken. And the philosophy needs to change for Georgia to be successful. You can't continue to come from behind and win football games. There's been a lot of breathless finishes, even going into the Alabama game. 3 of the last 6 games that Georgia had won or played, it ended with a walk-off touchdown on the final play. And yes, they played some very good competition, but there's also been some competition in there, and you're saying, what in the world is this a close game for? And Kentucky last year was an example of that. It was at their place. It was early, but still, I think there's going to be, I think that there will be some changes. I think that there'll be a good once over. You mentioned the sequencing that Kirby had. I think that a lot of the ways that Georgia used to do things, when you had guys that could execute, and I think you really pointed it out, you hurried up and you tricked Alabama, but you did it with guys that weren't capable of executing. And you have to look at what you have now. And those are 2 freshmen over there and a walk-on running back. And yes, you chose to trick them rather than take your time and go best on best, call timeout, put Josh McCray in, 1-yard blast, or as Lane Kiffin does, let your quarterback make the read at the line of scrimmage. They did have the play, but you pointed it out. They didn't have the personnel. And so I think that needs to be a consideration, more of a consideration as they call these plays. Hey, that's Talon Taylor. He's wide open. Yeah, well, he's never caught a pass like that in a game. He's a true freshman. Was he ready for the moment? So I think that in terms of the playbook, having a quarterback like Gunner that can call all these plays is great, but you got to have the support personnel. You got to have the receiver that can make that catch when he's wide open. You got to have the freshman that can make that block. And so I think this is an opportunity, though, Kentucky, for Georgia to kind of get recalibrated and, quite frankly, use this as a warm-up for what looks to be a really big showdown at Auburn on the Plains the following week.
So you said something I think is really important a moment ago, which is that Georgia has been living on the razor's edge, if you think about the end of last season, the start of this season. And what I can tell you is, as a fan of Georgia, it's thrilling, right? When you win the SEC championship the way you did, when you found a way to survive against Tech. The Tennessee game is about as much fun as a fan as I've had at a Georgia game in quite some time. I am thoroughly entertained by it, and I am so proud that Georgia won these games. And I also think it says something about Georgia that they were able to find a way, not quit, not tap out, and all the stuff that we always say. All of that is as true as ever. But what you alluded to that I think is important is, while all of that is true, it's not particularly predictive of the future. You can't always live on razor's edge, come back from I don't think Georgia's had a halftime lead against a Power 4 opponent in almost a year or something like that. You can't keep living that way, that right. Even if Georgia is not a dominant team anymore, and maybe no one's a dominant team anymore, even if Georgia's not quite a dominant team, I think they are going to have to create some more margin for error for themselves, or otherwise a lot of these bounces that have gone their way, eventually that's just going to start shaking the other direction. One of the most critical things that happened in the Tennessee game, for instance, was the fact that Georgia won the coin toss to get to bat last in the first overtime. That helped Georgia win that game almost as much as anything, because they could go for the touchdown with the full knowledge that they were going to win the game if they got it. That was a big deal. And a coin toss is a 50-50 proposition. In some of these overtime games and close calls and comebacks and furious, near comebacks like the Alabama game last September, a lot of this has been a 50-50 break that sort of went Georgia's way. If they don't create more margin for themselves, some of those breaks are just going to start going the other side.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with being a team that jumps out to a big lead and holding it. Alabama had a 10-point halftime lead. That worked out just fine for them. It's better to play from ahead, especially the way Georgia plays when you consider that Kirby wants to run the ball effectively and has run the ball effectively, and then choose your opportunities to play action and take your shots. It's not that you're going to stop trying to score, but the way Georgia does it is in a very conservative fashion. And that's the way this team is built. That's what you're going to get with Gunnar Stockton. He's going to be a guy that's going to lead long drives, and he's going to run a few yards here, although he didn't pull it down a lot in this last game. Curiously enough, there were some opportunities, but this team is built to play field position football, to take their shots selectively with an effective run game and play good defense and play turnover-free ball, Brandon. That was very important. That Nate Frazier fumble, that was huge. It's a 14-7 game. You finally stopped Alabama. You've got the ball. You can feel the momentum shifting, and here's Nate Frazier with his second fumble of the year. And, Kirby kind of shrugged it off when he fumbled against Austin Peay, right? He had 3 fumbles last year. He kind of shrugged it off. Well, it got him beat. Nate's a second-year guy. He's a young guy who had a problem last year, who's got a problem this year. And Chauncey Bowens emerged. That's the glass half full, is that, hey, wow, look at what Chauncey Bowens did. Man, this guy's good. You got 2 really good running backs. So maybe next time, knowing Nate Frazier's history, maybe you don't put him in the game inside your own 25-yard line. Maybe he's got to earn that trust with a half a season and some big-time carries where he doesn't cough it up in the clutch. So, I think a lot of this could have been prevented. And I think that this game was lost before it was played with some of the scripting. I don't think you can spot Alabama 14-0 lead. You can't wait till the second quarter for Gunnar Stockton to complete a pass. You got to get that guy comfortable. You got to get him out. Some of the play calls, ultra conservative, 3rd and 9 on the final drive. Why are you throwing it behind the line of scrimmage? And I know your next guest has pointed this out on some social media posts. I mean, a lot of the game planning and a lot of the scheming was just poor, quite frankly. This game was lost before it was played with the planning and the personnel selection and the lack of attention to detail of who you had on the field when you called those plays. And this isn't the first time it's happened. It happens with other teams. It happens with programs. There's so many moving parts. It's so fluid and so hard to maintain. But those little details, Alabama did just a little bit better. But most importantly, Alabama has not turned the ball over this season, and Georgia has.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that for the most part, we're on the same page. There's a lot to be critical of with Georgia coming off this game. Of course, that would be the case. And yet, at a certain point, you sort of feel like we've said all that can be said. So let me finish on a positive note, just to kind of change the energy of the discussion for a moment. Sure. Even though Nate Frazier had the fumble, Georgia ran for more than 200 yards on Saturday. Right. I do think that's a building block that can create a foundation for the rest of this season. They set out to improve in that area, and it seems like they have, and I think they do deserve credit for that. Defensively, the same way. The pass rush is, of course, non-existent, but they did limit Alabama running the football, and if you can do that, that's going to give you a chance to win every game you play the rest of the season, too. So even though the critical analysis is imperative, it has to happen right now, can we at least finish by saying that that's not a bad – if you need improvement, knowing you can run it and seemingly knowing you can stop the run, that's a pretty good foundation to build that improvement on top of, correct?
Oh, I think so. I mean, let's be honest. Georgia could be 0-2 right now. They could be 2-0. They could be 0-2. You're about where you should be with this football team. I think if we were going to say, how do we evaluate Gunnar Stockton? You say, you know what? He's good enough to win with. I think I would give that a passing grade. Say, yeah, this is working out with Gunnar at quarterback. He can do some things. He didn't turn the ball over. He didn't have any catastrophic mistakes. Yes, you lost your one returning starter, Ernest Green. Who knows if or when he'll be back. But Kirby said he feels good that maybe they found something on the line. So to your point, building block. To me, the biggest thing out there, and again, your next guest is going to be the perfect person to talk about this, the thing that's missing, that glaringly, is the pass rush. If you solve that and you get back to being Georgia and get guys that can stay in their lanes and affect the quarterback, I think that takes care of a lot of the problems. So yeah, you're about where you should be, quite frankly. There's not a lot of major injuries outside of Ernest. The defense is pretty healthy. It's a young team that will get better, Brandon, and it's a balanced SEC. And even though Kalen DeBoer, let's face it, he's out-coached Kirby twice, there's a pretty good chance that nobody else is going to out-fox or out-coach Kirby Smart and that staff the remainder of this year. In my opinion, I think this is a great staff, but I think DeBoer's just been one step ahead the last 2 years, and here we are. Tennessee can't beat Georgia, and for whatever reason, Georgia had their issue with DeBoer and Alabama, and that's where we sit. Everything's still in reach. Georgia's still in control of their destiny. A lot of young talent, a promising future, a win against Kentucky, and then let's see what happens on the plains under the lights, because that's going to be a big one for the Auburn Tigers. Remember, they got 2 losses, Brandon, but they're 1-score losses on the road to 2 top 6 teams. So that's going to be a great game.
I agree. To me, on paper, that's always been one of Georgia's toughest games, and I don't change my mind on that just because of the 2 recent Auburn losses. I think you're right, Mike. All right, so hopefully happier conversation next week. Please, Lord, let it be true. So hopefully that's the case, but we appreciate your time here today nonetheless.
Thank you. I look forward to this next segment. This is going to be good.
Good
See
stuff.
you guys.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, Mike's right. We'll get to this in a couple of minutes' time. Davin Bellamy is breathing fire right now today. So we're going to get to that here coming up in just a little bit. We'll get to that here in a bit. Can't wait for that. Prior to that, though, let's get ready to go cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And, of course, we love everything with the Royal Caribbean. Listen, I say this a lot, and I mean it. I'd love nothing more than be on a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation right now. There were plenty of moments on Saturday, once the excitement of the loud crowd, once all that kind of died down, you realize where this game might be going. I was like, I wonder what's happening at Perfect Day Coco Cay right now. I wonder what they're doing in the Caribbean right now. Only one way to find out. That's to take your own Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. Jessica Slater is a terrific travel advisor, specially selected for us by Royal Caribbean. She can tell you how to do that. You can give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. She's going to get you ready to go. It's a great time to take one, whether it's on Utopia of the Seas, Star of the Seas, any of the other gorgeous Royal Caribbean cruise ships. I'm telling you right now, this has been true for a couple of years. Royal Caribbean's about the hottest brand in the world. Everything they touch these days seems to turn to gold. Just people love the new ships. They love the new private destinations. Everybody is all about it, and Jessica Slater can tell you all about it. So make sure you check her out today. Okay, before we talk to Davin Bellamy about what happened for the Georgia defense on Saturday, and listen, we lean on stuff like this. As y'all know, it doesn't take much to talk over my head from a football standpoint. Once you start, using a lot of vernacular and whatever else, I have a tendency to sort of tune out on some of that. But that's why we have guys like Davin Bellamy, because they don't. Davin's been in it, and he's going to give it to us here in a hard way coming up in a moment. Let me go before that, though, as recruiters are in the SEC. Talk about a couple of these other big games coming up on Saturday, a couple that I have my eye on. Are you fascinated by Texas going to Florida? I would say that I am fascinated by this game. You think Georgia's got problems? Texas was the preseason number 1 team. They're outside the top 100 essentially for offense this season. Florida's even been worse than that. I think this is a very difficult game to handicap if you care about doing that. At the very least, I assume Texas wins, but I don't know. Doesn't it feel very college football that Florida may still have something to say about how this game is played, dictate some of the terms for the game? It is not a great slate in college football this week, but I think Florida, with Napier's job on the line, we're seeing coaches fired left and right. The Napier thing could happen at any moment. It could happen at any moment. Maybe showing a little signs of life against Texas. I'd be shocked if they win. I'd be shocked if they were to win. But I would not be shocked if this game provides some entertainment value. I just wouldn't. I also think that Vandy and Alabama is a fascinating game, too. As you know, Alabama lost to Vanderbilt last year. Georgia fans are going to be so aggravated because the whole thing comes up of, well, Georgia doesn't beat Alabama, but really who does beat Alabama? And a lot of Georgia fans are looking around and saying, well, these days a lot of teams do. 6-6 Oklahoma, Vandy a year ago. I'm just telling you right now, if Vandy goes into Tuscaloosa, I assume that the magic of Diego Pavia is going to run out. I don't expect Vanderbilt to win this game. But you got to keep it real with Vandy. They're 5-0, I think. They've won every single game, I believe, in an excess of 20 points. They won back-to-back road games against, Virginia Tech, South Carolina, typically very tough places to play. They won both those games with some margin. This is a Vandy team that's got about 1 million seniors. I mean, their average age of their roster is about 25 years old, it seems like. And they're playing like it right now. I think that's a pretty interesting game. And then 2 other games I'll mention here. Let me do one in the SEC, then one outside the SEC. Mississippi State going into Texas A&M. This is one of those games that's a richer storyline than you realize. So on paper, this feels like the power program, Texas A&M, hosting the Mississippi State team that's the plucky underdog that's trying to show that they can hang with one of the SEC's supposed big boys. 100,000-seat stadium would suggest that A&M's kind of a macro brand. But the honest truth is a little bit different than that. What are we doing here? This is the 14th time, I believe, that A&M and Mississippi State have played. They've essentially split those games. I think it's 7-6 in favor of A&M in the 13 previous matchups for these two teams since A&M joined the SEC. Plus, many of you remember, as recently as 2014, Mississippi State was briefly the number 1 team in the country. They were the first team to ever be ranked number 1 by the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. A&M, I don't believe, has been number 1 since like 1940, whatever. It's been forever ago that they had that kind of national prestige. So it's one of those weird games where A&M thinks it's a far more prestigious program than Mississippi State is. The actual facts, I don't know, support that point of view quite as much. I'll also mention Florida State, Miami. Well, I promise we'll do a lot more on this before the Saturday comes. Florida State trying to bounce back from a loss, and Carson Beck, and you'll just notice what we don't do around here. Carson Beck had some things to say about Georgia this week. That was low-hanging fruit. We didn't take the bait on that. We didn't do that as a topic. But just know this. The fact that Beck used to be the Georgia quarterback and now he's not. If Miami continues to win, that's going to be a bigger and bigger story. And it has the potential to be an unpleasant narrative for Georgia. Just know that. Just be aware of that. But also be aware of what we don't do. Beck talking about Georgia, easy topic. We let that go here this week. Hopefully you noticed that. I will make that cruise around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And before I bring on Davin Bellamy, I'll see you a reminder here. Obviously, we're getting ready for a huge one at the end of the season, clean old-fashioned hate. That's what we think of it as. Coming to Mercedes-Benz Stadium on Black Friday afternoon. And listen, Georgia fans have a chance to be there. Georgia fans have a chance to turn this into a Georgia home game. This is one of those years where you better be ready to do that. You know, a lot of stakes in that game here this year. So Georgia fans, we expect to show up in full throat and full presence there in that spot. So as you get ready for that one, we want you to be a part of this. If you'll go to mercedes-benzstadium.com/events, you can purchase your tickets. That's mercedes-benzstadium.com/events. The fact of the matter is, we need as many Georgia fans in that building as we can get. Tech fans are more excited about this game than they've been in a long time. But it's up to us to show them we still run this state. So be there, be loud. Best way to do it is to get your tickets here right now. In fact, if you're trying to think which Georgia game is going to go to and how do I get my tickets for whatever, this is one where the on-sale opportunity is about as easy and simple as anything you're going to get. Some of these games are sort of complicated to go to. Some of these games have a little bit of a high barrier to entry. I think you're going to find that to be a little bit more accessible for the Georgia Tech game, clean old-fashioned hate, as we think of it as, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So go to mercedes-benzstadium.com/events, and you can get your tickets for the game Black Friday afternoon there at Mercedes-Benz Stadium here this year. Okay, without further ado, let's talk to our next guest here. My goodness, so much to say here. It's Davin Bellamy. Davin, we lean on you and stuff like this because you've been in the battle. And before we get into the critical analysis, and we need to do that with you, I know you'll say, like a lot of other former players have said this week, that while, you know, our heart kind of breaks when Georgia loses or you get frustrated, whatever else, you, as much as anybody, knows what it feels like to be in the arena and to have everybody scrutinizing every move that you're making. And, you know, listen, Georgia fans still love these players. Georgia fans still love this team. Georgia fans just want to win games. That's just the nature of the rough and tumble SEC. So as a player yourself, you kind of know what it's like to look at other players and say, why didn't you do this? Or why couldn't you have done that? But you also, as a player, knows what it feels like to be in the fishbowl and having people making that sort of analysis of you. And frankly, that's not a very easy thing to be either, right?
Right. Excuse me. Yeah, man. I mean, when you're actually, you know, in the locker room, you understand you can't, you know, win them all. And you understand you want to win them all, you know, but you can't. And you understand that you're playing in the toughest conference in college football. And you got to bring it every given Saturday. So I'm pretty sure those guys inside the locker room aren't, you know, listening to this. You know, Coach Smart does a great job of making sure the outside noise does not come in. And then you kind of know that there is still time to right your wrong. You know, the best thing about losing is now we get back to the drawing board. Practice is taken a little bit more seriously. And guys start to look themselves, you know, in the mirror. You know, I look at it as we were undefeated going up against, you know, Auburn, and we were feeling ourselves. You know, I can't sit here and tell you that we weren't. You know, it's a natural human, you know, emotion. You know, I was feeling myself, you know, so when we got our butt stumped the way we did, that reset us and that got us going. But always in the SEC, man, it's hard to run a table.
Yeah.
I mean, everything has to be perfect. You can't get injured. You got to have a perfect game. You got to win a turnover battle, you know, every week. That's tough to do. You can still lose 2-3 games and get to where you want to get to. But in some cases, you know, I look back at the 2017 team, I think the best thing that happened for us was to lose that game. And I kind of think the same thing goes here. And this is kind of just leading me to the next point. This is not the Georgia team that I'm used to seeing, not only to the X's and O's, you know, we'll get to that. But there are going to be 2 more clips that I'll post today of just the attitude of this team that I don't like. And it has nothing to do with coaching. First, the first clip is going to be the swing pass to Cash Jones.
Okay.
And he runs out of bounds, and then the other Bama player comes and takes him off his feet and dumps him on the ground on their sideline. And then you see 4 guys from Bama standing over top of Cash Jones. And then you watch everybody from the Georgia team walk back to the huddle. Don't go over there to make sure no one is doing anything nasty to their teammate. First of all, on the teams that I was on, you don't stand over my teammate while I'm on the field. I'm running over there and I'm pushing you. And the first time it may be a flag, but just that is what I didn't like. And then on the defensive side of the ball, we got guys expecting the other guys, to make a play. I mean, you got guys tackling, getting there first. The running back is still fighting for yardage. And we got our 330-pound defensive tackles not trying to come finish the guy off. And when I look at stuff like that, man, that game, when I really took a deep dive into it, of course, the third down stuff was just they're 11 for 19, we're 2 for 8. I don't think people are talking about that enough. The most important down in football is third down. That's why pass rushers are paid the most. That's why quarterbacks are paid the most. That's why wide receivers are paid the most. And that's why the offensive line is paid the most.
Yeah.
Because that third down, you got to have a guy to go get the quarterback. You got to have a guy to go protect the quarterback. You got to have a guy that can deliver the ball, and you got to have a wide receiver that can get to the sticks and make the plays. But just this attitude, Bama was more physical than us. They had more of a swagger. They had more nastiness to them. And honestly, in my opinion, I thought they kind of, intimidated us a little bit. And that's what I'm seeing that I just did not like. I just didn't like it, Brandon.
No, I think your words are well said. I do. And I think that a lot of people are happy to hear them. And one of the things you also mentioned online that I think is, at least to my untrained and naked eye seems true is that not only is Georgia not getting sacks right now, I think we gave the number, at least according to someone's tabulation, they've only gotten 12 quarterback pressures all year. And you touched on this, not only are they not getting sacks, but they are, at least as measured by some, not even hurrying quarterbacks along. They're not making life uncomfortable for quarterbacks, even if it doesn't quite result in a sack. And as I think you said, you've at least got to do that if you're not getting sacks.
Yeah. I mean, we made, Tyler Simpson look like, Tom Brady. By the third quarter, his jersey was still white. And we can't get pressure with 4. So we're trying to be, exotic and run games up front and create mismatches and maybe confuse the O-line because we just don't have a guy, who can win on one-on-one. And I'm just calling it like I said. I'm not trying to downgrade the guys, but I just don't see a guy consistently winning on the edge with moves. And that tells me that you've been working your craft and your go-to move. So we try to do these exotic schemes up front. And we got guys running into each other. I mean, we can't even run the games. We got guys running into each other when we're trying to get exotic. So we can't bring 4 or 5 because we're not going to win on one-on-one. So we try to trick the offensive line and run games, and then you run into each other. I mean, we got guys not staying in their lanes. Brandon is getting to the point to where Tyler Simpson, I can guarantee you, man, it looked from his point of view, looked like 7-on-7. When you can't even collapse the pocket, and like we talked about last week, the quarterback throwing the ball from a well, where he got to throw it from out the pocket, where even if you don't have speed rushers that's just blazing off the edge, you got guys that's just standing in their lanes and forming a chaotic cage. So maybe if he throw the ball, he hits his thumb, on his tackle's helmet. It's like we're not even getting those. The pass rush lanes are things that you're taught in high school. And I think the most disappointing thing about me when I'm watching this Dawgs front 7 is it's just not college level, Brandon.
Okay.
I mean, the first third down, he takes off for a 15-yard gain. And I'm pretty sure that guy who's at the nose guard, I forgot what number it was. You're at nose guard. You got 2 edges burning the edge. I'm at nose guard, and I got 2 guys behind me, my backers, and they're running across dog. It's just my job just to make sure I stay in front of the quarterback. We got guys trying to do other guys' job and just saying, forget the pass rush lanes. I want to go get my sack and we're allowing the quarterback to step up with no hands in his face, and he can see the whole field. When a quarterback is able to step up in the pocket, his completion ratage goes up 80% because there's nobody in his face. That's why if you go to a practice and you watch, a team run 7-on-7, the ball barely touches the ground because there's nobody in their face. And that's what we made Tyler Simpson, look like. When you're 13 for 19 on third down, and it's not 3rd and 3s and 3rd and 5s, that is a direct correlation of not affecting the quarterback. And just right now, it's not at a collegiate level. It's just not at a collegiate level.
So let me ask you this, because obviously Georgia fans are hopeful that it gets better. How reasonable is it to assume that it will? I mean, I don't think this is going to magically become the 2021 defense. And as I think we've said, I don't think anyone's ever going to be the 2021 defense again. That was a historic moment that I'm glad I had a chance to live through. Probably not repeating that history ever again. But you probably do need to be better than you've been just to have a chance. So whether it's maybe Chris Cole's your best pass rusher, how do you feature him in that more? Or how do you scheme something up different? Is there something that can be done that allows this to be better before the season ends?
Bring pressure. I mean, I'm looking at guys not do, like, you have an offensive tackle that's 6'8", 330 pounds. And every defensive end is taught. I'm not trying to just go into this training mode. But, I mean, when I'm watching some of the tape, they're running right down the middle of 6'8", 330. And when I pause the tape, their hands are like this. I mean, we don't even have long arms. So that tells me that when a guy's trying to go power, he doesn't know what to do because he doesn't have the move to go power. When he wants to go speed, he can't say, I'm doing a speed rush. The 2-minute drill against Notre Dame, I said, I'm going to stab, swipe. That's what I'm going to do. And I did it. The sack against, Auburn, I'm going to stab, swipe. That's what I'm going to do. Aziz, when he closed the game out against, I think it was Cincinnati in the bowl game, he said, I'm going to do a cross chop. And he did it. So 5 games in, you are what you are. You are what the film says. I mean, we can continue to go back to the drawing board, but you are what the film says. We can't win one-on-ones. Bring pressure. Bring pressure. And that's what we saw on the first 3rd down. I mean, at this point, as the defense, of staff, you kind of got to be worried a little bit. And I think you're about to start to see other guys get some opportunities. I watched Coach Smart press conference, and he was talking about the transfer and the guy from the Army. I forgot his name.
Elo Modozie.
Yeah. He was talking about him and how they have to find a way to get him on the field. Because right now, I think the defensive staff is just, at a point where they're not going to say it to the public. But I've been in those rooms. Everybody knows the sack numbers. And I've been in those rooms where they are, I'm guaranteeing you, challenging the D-line, and they're not, answering the call. We're just going to have to bring more pressure.
Let me finish with this, if you don't mind, on the other side of the ball for a moment. Obviously, a lot has been said all week about the sequence at the end that resulted in the blown-up play that got Cash Jones tackled behind the line, ending that drive. And it's obviously a complicated football thing with do you want to go hurry up? Do you want to try to beat Alabama to the line? Georgia seemed to get the advantageous alignment on the part of Alabama. They were clearly offset far to the the boundary side, creating a lot of space there on the open side of the field, but ultimately the play still got blown up. What did you think about that sequence for Georgia and what essentially ended any chance of a Georgia comeback?
Man, you got to go with the flow of the game. Man. Speaking from a defensive player, just to get on about, going fast, right? So guys my size, 6'4", 250, 240, 230, we're meant to be going forward, using speed. So when a team is running a hurry up, as a defensive player, that affects me, right? Because I really don't supposed to be on the field on 4th and 1. as a lean, edge guy. That's when we want to bring the big boys in, and I'm on the sideline. So when you go quickly, you got speed rushers doing what speed rushers don't want to do. That's taking on double teams. That's trying to stop quarterback sneaks, and the weight just doesn't allow us to be as dominant as if we put our big boys in. So I do understand that is when you got the personnel on the field. Coach Smart wanted to keep that personnel on the field because he thought that 6'8", 330 would cause more momentum on a speed rusher that was left in the game because we went hurry up and they couldn't bring the elephant package on, whereas big guys, he thought that size and not allowing those guys to sub in would allow us to get the first down. So that's where I understand that standpoint. It's a lot of times, playing for Greg Williams, he goes cover zero, mug front, and I'm lined up in the A gap. That's all cute on 3rd and 8 when you got speed on the center. But what a lot of teams started doing was, let's check the inside zone. Whenever you see speed in those A gaps, check the inside zone. Birds fly and fishes swim. I rush the passer. I'm not supposed to be a nose guard. Mm-hmm. So when they run the inside zone, now me at 6'4", 250 pounds, I'm getting double teamed by the center. That's 300. I'm getting double teamed by the guard. That's 300. I got 600 pounds, 250 pounds. I'm supposed to be on the field. So that's what the offense is thinking of. We got you with that personnel on the field. Now we can take advantage of it. We just missed the block. But when I go back to the flow of the game shows that your defense can't stop them. It just can't stop them. The quarterback is playing with crazy confidence. He has no fear. At some points, he's dropping back in the pocket, Brandon, 13 yards. That means when his back foot hits, he's not even stepping up in the pocket trying to let those speed rushers burn by. By the fourth quarter, he's backing up 13 yards because he's not afraid of a speed rush. So he doesn't care about stepping up. Now he can really see the field. So I'm looking at Kirby Smart. We go tie that game up. It's 24-24. I know everybody's saying, they didn't score the second half. They didn't. But did you see the last drive? That's a gotta have it by the defense. We can still win this game. And guess what? They got whatever they wanted on that drive too. So you mean to tell me if we kick that field goal and we tied up and Tyler Simpson looks like the next becoming of Tom Brady against us, you don't think they can drive down and get 3? They've showed all day. At one point, they were 8 for 8 on 3rd down, so we can't get off the field. So we tie that game up. I'm pretty sure just by off the data and off what we saw, they're going to go in and get 3. I think Kirby mindset right now was, look, this guy is out coaching me right now, and I can't find a call to stop him. And players play and coaches coach. Sometimes the player makes up for a bad call and vice versa. The flow of the game showed that Kalen DeBoer, he out-schemed us, and their players out one-on-one us. So Kirby Smart mindset was, let's try we can change the momentum. Let's make it 28-24. We know they haven't scored this whole second half. If we make it 28-24, it may be hard for them to get a touchdown. And they may get a field goal range, showing how this game is going. So that game could have easily finished 24-28 because you just got to look at the flow of it. Mm-hmm. So I think that's where he's thinking. And the last thing I'm going to say is, if you want the coach to start, taking the points, well, your defense got to play better. Sometimes when coaches go for it on 4th down, it's like playing, Patrick Mahomes. We got to score because we know we can't stop him. Mm-hmm. And 3 is not going to do it. If we keep going down again 3 against the Chiefs, Pat is going to come and score. So when you start seeing that, especially in the end of the game, that's kind of Coach Smart saying, I don't have a call that's stopping this guy, and I don't have a player that can stop him. We got to get 28. We got to get 28. So, that's a controversial call, but if you look at last year, Texas A&M versus Texas, and I've been saying this, if you can't get a 4th and 1, or if you can't get 1 yard in the SEC when the defense know you need it, then you're not going to get where you want to get to. Last year, Texas A&M versus Texas, whoever wins this game goes to the SEC championship game. Texas A&M was at the 1 yard and got stopped for 4 straight plays, and they was at home. This is the SEC. There's going to be a time where you're going to have to out-bully people. And I just don't see that happening right now. Still early. Relax. Breathe. They check themselves. I guarantee you they're going to have the hardest practice this week they've probably ever had. We got to get back to the drawing board. So I got a lot of confidence in this team. Coming into this year, you knew this team was young. You knew this team had a lot of talent. These guys got to get their feet wet. You got to get the feet wet. But in the same breath, by week 5, you're not that great anymore. You're the next one. So you're not a freshman anymore by week 6. You're a sophomore. You're not a sophomore anymore. You're a junior. So the excuses of being young are getting played out. You got to step up to the plate, and accept the challenge.
Davin, strong words. Appreciate your analysis. Obviously, we think that you know a lot about this stuff, and we're glad to have you share your wisdom with us. I hope folks are seeing all this. In fact, for people who want to see on X or Instagram the different places you're putting this, how can they find the breakdowns that you're providing online?
Yeah, man. You can go on the team meeting, IG page the same way. On Twitter, it's there on my page, Davin Bellamy 17, and also my YouTube channel, One Love Media 17.0VE Media. And I appreciate all the support, man. Definitely.
Davin, great stuff. I look forward to talking to you soon. Thanks so much for your time.
All right, baby. Let's still go Dogs, baby. Don't forget.
Listen, I'm right there with you on that. No doubt.
For sure.
Davin, good stuff. Appreciate that.
No doubt.
And obviously we all feel that way that, listen, I've been loving Georgia football for a very long time, and there is nothing that's going to ever happen that makes me love Georgia football 1 ounce less than I already do. That's one of the things that, and we're late here, I'm going to get ready to wrap up, but that's one of the things that was just so apparent to me on Saturday because y'all know I've been dealing with a little bit of a voice thing, wasn't able to work, and so I just, it caused you to kind of question a lot of things. And when I'm there in that stadium before the game began, no real certainty if Georgia's going to win or lose. But the mindset that you have is, at least for me, is like win or lose. There's no place I'd rather be, nowhere I'd rather be than right here, right now. And over the course of my lifetime, as somebody who's been going to these games since I was very, very little, a small child, boy, you could stack the losses I've experienced and it'd fill a warehouse. Sometimes it seems that way anyway. But the passion, the love, it's one of the ways in which I identify myself. I am very proud of the state that I'm from, and I love the people who live in the state that I'm from. And one of the ways in which we share our heritage is through this Georgia football team. And that passion's never going away. And as Davin says right there, you may break down 9 ways to Sunday, all the things that went wrong, but when it's all said and done, it's still go Dogs, and it's how do you get better from here? And I think that's a really, really good stuff from Davin Bellamy on that. I'll tell you something else I think is really good. That's the rich one-of-a-kind flavor of Dr. Pepper. And so I've got one in the cooler. It's literally right there. Little nice ice-cold Dr. Pepper, a little bit of a treat for the end of the show here, soothing to my voice as as it goes down. I can't wait to enjoy it. I'm going to invite you, as you're enjoying some college football this year, don't forget there's a deep connection between college football and Dr. Pepper. You see the Fansville commercials, everything like that. So this time of year is a great time to enjoy Dr. Pepper. So at your local Kroger, wherever you're doing your grocery shopping, pick up the rich one-of-a-kind flavor of Dr. Pepper. Maybe if you haven't been drinking it on game day, it's a good time to start. Maybe it'll change the Georgia fortunes here the rest of the season. We don't really believe in superstition, but we're also open to anything here right now. So with that said, enjoy the rich one-of-a-kind flavor, and we are so thrilled to have Dr. Pepper as a part of DawgNation Daily. And as we wrap up here today, a different source of negativity just for a moment. As I mentioned during our R.S. Andrews cool down yesterday, I didn't love the sound effect that Georgia kept playing, mostly on second down. I guess it comes from the remake of the movie All Quiet on the Western Front. I think that ominous can sometimes be a good idea. But as I've said, when you've got the really loud crowd and everybody's yelling, I think the pulsating, the doom, doom, something that has a good, repetitive bass line just seems to work better with that for whatever reason. That's what seems to cause problems for me. When my team's on the road, you match the really pulsating, frantic music to go with the loud crowd just seems to work. I think that Georgia, if I'm being honest, probably missed the mark on that on Saturday. For our golden shoe today, though, we'll point out that as Ryan Dennis reported in the Athens Banner Herald, because of something that Alan Thomas, who's I guess in charge of all this, said on 960 The Ref. The headline here is the Georgia fans were maybe, this was what was written on X, likely haunted by that second down song. Georgia's acknowledging they're going to evaluate how many times it was used. It certainly sounds like they're going to play that sound if you saw it on TV or if they're in the stadium. That it's almost like a sound effect because it's not quite a song because there wasn't much melody to it. And frankly, there's only even a couple of notes. It was just a really, I thought, weird choice. I thought it missed the mark for an otherwise great day, atmosphere-wise, in Sanford Stadium. And it sounds like Georgia itself has come to that same conclusion. So we'll give a golden shoe for everybody who wants a do-over on that. It seems like that's what Georgia's going to take, and so we're glad they've reevaluated that. Good reporting from both our friends at 960 The Ref and the Athens Banner-Herald, who kind of got it out there far and wide. I think this is a good thing. I think that Georgia needs to do something different than that. Sounds like they're going to. Lousy, stinking Gators. Listen, no matter what they've got going on in their stadium, it doesn't seem to help them these days. About 1,789 days. That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. It's our Gator Hater Updater. Y'all have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management. All right, good to have you here. Time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down. I'm telling you right now, I can't be doing hour and 20-minute shows. I'm trying to give my voice a rest. I cannot be doing that. By the way, Delmar Lane Reloaded says that BA is a natural salesman, also a hustler. He says, I ain't had a Dr. Pepper in 20 years. Now I'm looking for one, shaking my head. Hey, listen, that's what we try to do. Here's the one thing, and thankfully, the sponsors we have on the show are sponsors that really are a part of my life. Like, I've been a Dr. Pepper fan my entire life, and so it's a natural thing for me. These are companies that I'm very closely related to. I've gotten to know the business people on the other side of this, and they're people with families. They're trying to raise their kids. They're trying to live a good life. They're trying to make their community better. They're honestly just like us. They're not wildly rich or anything like that. They're just business people trying to have a good life. And so if I can do something to make that just a little bit easier, increase their sales just a little bit, or hopefully a lot. But I do believe in my sponsors. I really do. Y'all know I'm kind of a corny guy. I am. Corny people have a tendency to be earnest. Earnest is not cool. But I am a earnest person. I'm earnest about Georgia football. I really, really like it. I'm earnest about my sponsors. I really, really believe in them. We're happy when Georgia wins. We're sad when Georgia loses. We don't have a lot of ironic detachment. I'm sarcastic, but not ironic. And that's just who we are. D-Mart says, let Cody and Kaylee do the cool downs. So I've been given the permission to work, just with the caveat of just try not to overdo it. The overdo it part has always been a little bit hard for me. But yes. Alan Hampton says that Georgia needs a fun song that everybody can sing along to. I do think that's probably true. That's not something that Georgia really has. Whether Alabama has Dixieland Delight, the way that Tennessee now does the Morgan Wallen song, Florida has the Tom Petty song. Georgia probably needs their version of that. I think that's probably true. I think that Sanford Stadium is an awesome place to go to a game, and I think that a lot has been done to make that a very intimidating place to play. No longer have the big home winning streak, but obviously you can have a chance to restart one of those on Saturday, and I trust that Georgia will. I think that Georgia gets a lot right when it comes to how it feels to go to a game at Sanford Stadium. I genuinely love being there. I'm sad that we only get to do it 6 or 7 times during a year, but I do think there's some things that could be better. I think that's the case. Brodo Baggins says, just do the intro to kickstart my heart. So I am totally ambivalent about the kind of music you play, whether it be hip hop or like what you might think of as, I never know the right genre to say for this. It's like electronic EDM type club music, I sort of think of it as. To me, that's the music that works best in the stadium because A, it doesn't have vulgar words, and B, it just pulsates. It's doom, doom, doom. And when the crowd's getting loud, the pulsating, like extreme boom, boom of the bass just works well. It just matches it well. You know, an 80s era rock song might not be quite the same thing, but like a rock song like that also has the same pulsating rhythm. You know what I'm saying? I'm not a music expert, but it's like, you know, it can't be a slow beat. It's got to be boom, 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 boom. So for sure. Tennille says, just stay away from LSU style of sing-alongs. Yeah, I know that it's cool to like when they play neck and stuff like that. Y'all, I just am not like that. I just am not like that. And I also try not to be like the fun police either, because that's lame. I don't want to be that. But I thought the Ryder Cup crowds this week were awful, just terrible. And I love that. So here's some pulsating music. Maybe something with a little more teeth in this, but this is a rhythm that goes along with that. Maybe a little more teeth in that, but you want the pulsating rhythm. It's like, you know, also to show what I know, you know, now a lot of these stadiums also play like that Mo Bamba song that was popular like 10 years ago. That's become a third down song. To me, that song is slow, and what I know about hip hop wouldn't fit in my pocket. I mean, I don't know anything about hip hop, so certainly my opinions on hip hop don't matter at all. But to me, Mo Bamba is slow, and somehow it's still become a good third down song, I guess. But I don't think you want slow. And ominous, like that Georgia tried to use, was okay, but I think just pulsating is better. That's what Tennessee does. I mean, Auburn does that. They just play this very rhythmic, very intense. They just play loud music, and honestly, that just seems to work. Patrick Ford said we're going to do a D&D house party. Yeah, that's one of those things. So I'll come back to YouTube in a moment. Let me check out DawgNation.com for a second. We'll see how they're doing over there. I'll also pull up Facebook here too. We'll see what's going on with people. Next couple days in the show mostly focused on how Georgia beats Kentucky, and I don't say this in like a negative. I'm not certainly trying to troll, but I really don't take anything for granted moving forward. Georgia's mostly played close games with Kentucky, at least closer than the experts expected in recent years, and so I'm kind of on guard for anything moving forward. And once again, that's not a troll. That's not a doom and gloom. I'm not what we call a doomer. I'm not a doomer. I'm just on guard. Randy Hall says about the high school game this week. We got a good one. We're going to see Harrison and McEachern. McEachern's who we saw in the Corky Kell Classic when Casey Barner, the 2028 prospect, had the 3-touchdown night. One of two guys we've had on TV this season that have had 3 touchdowns in a game. Casey Barner's an electric guy. Harrison's a very good team too, so I'm looking forward to that. Savannah Bryan, always a good commenter, says, last week the ESPN article about Kirby Smart was all about his amazing passion for Georgian football, how he's super eager to win more championships and do awesome things at Georgia. But then his post-game conference seemed totally different. I'm just scratching my head trying to figure out why he didn't seem even remotely worried about losing to Bama again. So, Brian, you're an awesome commenter, and I'm glad that you've said what you've said here. And I think it also gives me a chance to, like, the one rule we try to follow here is we try to be fair. I want to be fair to Georgia fans who feel like that with all the time and money and things like that they devote to Georgia, that there needs to be extraordinary accountability when things don't go well. I want to be fair to those fans. I also want to be fair to the principals involved, coaches, players. That as we do critical analysis, we also give some space for what doesn't become an ad hominem attack. And I'm not saying that's what you're doing. I'm saying I want to make sure that I go a long way to avoid that. In this particular case, here's what I mean. That Kirby, I said this yesterday, did not give what I thought was a very good answer when asked about losing to Alabama again. He did seem to, as you suggest, shrug it off. I don't think that answer is probably reflective of Kirby's actual feelings. I think sometimes the absolute truth is either hard to think of in the moment or maybe hard to say in the moment. The absolute truth is what do you want me to say if I'm Kirby? What do you want me to say? No, I'm not happy that we lost Alabama again. Obviously, I didn't quite have the solution to prevent that in this particular moment. Otherwise, I would have done something differently. It's like, I remember one time I got in trouble. It's one of the reasons why we never came down too hard on the Georgia players, but the speeding issues, because I got a speeding ticket one time for excessive speeding. Had to go, it was serious. I was 18 years old, and I'd go before the judge. This is a true story. I had to go before the judge, and, she kept asking me, like, why are you going so fast? And the honest truth is there was a good answer. I didn't have a good answer. And so she kept coming back to the question because I wasn't giving a good answer. But in my mind, there really wasn't a good answer. There was no explanation for why I was doing something dumb, because a lot of teenagers do inexplicably dumb things. I just happen to do that. And listen, I'm not making a lot of it. I think it's dangerous to drive fast. I was driving way too fast, but there really wasn't a good explanation. You could have asked me the question 9,000 times. I was never going to give you a good answer. Like I said, my own personal life experience has caused me to be a little lighter on some of the very serious issues that Georgia's dealt with, because he who without sin ... But nonetheless, bring it back to Kirby Smart. To me, there's a little bit of a similar thing going on here. How come you lost Alabama again? The honest truth is, Kirby would say, I don't know. And I hate it just as much as anybody else does. But you don't want to necessarily, you don't necessarily want to give in that moment. As we also said on the yesterday show, the better answer that he could have given, and this, by the way, is true, even if we don't want it to be true, it is true, that college football is a weird sport. Georgia seemingly can't beat Alabama, and yet Georgia dominates teams that beat Alabama a lot more frequently. Tennessee's beaten them 2 of the last 3 years. Tennessee couldn't sniff a win against Georgia. Auburn has beaten them fairly consistently over the course of the last, decade plus, at least a handful of times, far more frequently than Georgia has. And yet Auburn has beaten Georgia once in this. It feels like once this century. It's been a little bit more than that, but doesn't feel like it. Some people say there's no such thing as coincidences. I happen to believe there are coincidences. And I know it's too flippant and too trite to say that some of this is just weird college football coincidence, but I do think some of that maybe is true, that, how come they always lose to Alabama, but they always beat the teams that Alabama sometimes loses to? There may not be a good explanation for that. I understand where you're coming from. And look, we don't have blasphemy laws in this show. If you want to criticize Kirby Smart, go for it. I think that's fine. If you want to criticize anybody fairly for what happened on Saturday, that's what this platform really is for. I'm not in the censorship business. You are free to say what you want. I think when I possibly can, I just want to give the appropriate context. I'm a person of faith, and how my faith shows up on the show is I try to be honest and I want to be fair. And the intersection of honesty and fairness is where we try to do this show from. Do we always get it right? Maybe not, because I'm not a perfect person. But that's what does matter to me. Can we simultaneously be honest while also being fair? Try to do that. Let's go to Facebook here for a moment. We'll see what's going on there. Saying is better. That's what he does. On Facebook. Taste of All says wide receivers couldn't catch last year. Not much better so far this year. When does Kirby accept mediocrity? Yeah, obviously, I think that your mileage may vary in terms of how much you agree with that sentence that Kirby accepts mediocrity. I don't believe that Georgia's ever going to be as dominant again as it once was. I don't think so. But the issue here is not, can Georgia be dominant? The issue is, can Georgia be excellent? And I would say that's very much up for grabs right now too. I don't know. You can have an elite standard that you hold yourself to, but if you look around college football, there are various levels of achievement related to that standard. if you look at the Nick Saban era at Alabama, Nick Saban, the all-time great coach, and they were mostly excellent every year, but they would also go a couple of years without winning a national championship. They never went more than 3 years, though. It's interesting to note that. They won in 12. They won again in 15. That's a 3-year span. Once Nick Saban won his first at Alabama, they never went more than 3 years without winning their next one. And if Georgia were to not win a national championship this year, that would be 3 years since the most recent. There's not a lot of examples of coaches. You got Bobby Bowden, for instance, at Florida State, 93, then 99. When coaches win multiple national championships, they have a tendency to win them in bunches closely connected together. Dabo won his first in 16, won his next in 18. Urban at Florida won his first in 2006, won his next in 2008. After that, didn't win one at Florida again. Did win one at Ohio State in 2014, but you had a separation of job between then. So, what you have here right now is a very high standard for achievement at Georgia and a team that in some respects is not fully meeting that standard. I think that's probably true. All right, let me get a couple more. Miriam Corbin says the thing that made the 1 second down sound effect even worse, and everybody seems to agree on this, the fact that Georgia just could not get off the field made it even worse. It was synchronized with the lights really well, but the lights don't make noise. I thought the lights, I'm talking about the LED wristbands, I thought they looked really cool. I really did. I thought they looked really cool. They added to the atmosphere. But nothing's more valuable than noise. And pulsating party-type music, up-tempo style music, I think increases the noise. But I'm telling you right now, Georgia fans were at their best. They were at their best. Y'all, I mean, I just love this sort of thing. I had chills. I really did. I had chills. There's just a feeling. I mean, it just felt like the coolest place in the world to be prior to the game. Yeah. And I mean this as sincerely as I'm capable of. I don't think anybody captures it better than Cody Chaffins does on video too. I genuinely look forward to his videos. He captures it so well. And you're seeing it right there. Y'all, that's a really cool thing. And there were so many celebrities on the sideline. I told you how cool I felt being on the sideline with all of them before the game. I mean, even the security guards were talking about how, man, can you believe this place right now? Even they were kind of wrapped up in how it all felt, because I know a lot of them. And everybody just recognized the feeling. And honestly, sometimes it didn't go your way. Penn State lost the whiteout game. Georgia lost this game. That's the thing is, as a fan, you get into your spirit knowing that your outcome is not guaranteed, but you still do it anyway. It was a really good thing. Let's see what else. Randy Hollow asking about what fired up song should they use. So I don't know that it necessarily even needs to be a famous song. It just needs to be a good rhythm with like a, like I said, I'm probably describing the genre wrong. I just think anything that comes across as sort of like EDM club rave style music, for whatever reason, I just think that works the best. And I'm a total agnostic to musical style. In this particular case, my personal music tastes are irrelevant. I want music that gets the crowd loud or amplifies the noise of the crowd. And I just think that kind of music seems to work the best. Plus, it's not profane, which I prefer. By the way, DT throwing it back with an old rock anthem in here. Jennifer Stevenson Fleming says, I think we should have, pressured Simpson more. Yeah, no doubt. To me, that's the biggest thing from the game. Biggest thing from the game, I think, for sure. Nick Roundtree brings up an interesting point. He says the reality is that college football is now NFL light. We still care about beating our SEC rivals, and we should, but the weight of losing is not what it used to be. Nobody will trade a win over Bama for an SEC title or a college football playoff berth. It is becoming a little bit more different. Now, keep in mind on this, too. The one thing that college ball is still holding on to is all that talk about the atmospheres, things like that. There are a couple of places where it's true, but for the most part, NFL atmospheres are not thought of as great as they once were. Almost all of the old stadiums are better than the new stadiums in the eyes of almost anybody who cares about the NFL. It's just true. So we are holding on to that. And, you know, we're going to have to make peace with some of the, as Nick says here, you know, like what we see with Ohio State and Michigan, for instance, is something that Georgia's going to have to deal with too. And maybe Georgia's also on the other end of it, where you've maybe jokingly heard me say, I consider Georgia to be the basketball national champions because they beat the national champion. Now, obviously, I'm just being a jerk when I say that, but it's fun to have head-to-head rights to brag on. Michigan gives Ohio State all kinds of grief because they say, even though you won the national championship, you still can't beat us. In the SEC, we're going to have some of that, where a team's going to win the national championship also while having lost to one of the teams that probably hates losing to. And it's going to be a weird thing where so-and-so, maybe it's Georgia bragging about winning the national championship while so-and-so is bragging about having beaten. Yeah, and you say, well, listen, that national championship trophy is not worth a dime in this state because we beat you. And by the way, if we happen to beat, or Georgia happens to beat, and we have happen to celebrate that win, we'll be doing the same thing. You don't think I don't want to mention a possibility here, but if so-and-so from the SEC were to go on to win the national championship, but they lost to Georgia, you don't think we'd be making all kinds of a big deal about that? Of course we would. Of course we would. All right, final comments. We have got to go. I'm going to get in trouble. Tay Stovall says, I just want to see them play the first half of a game. Yeah, that's got to be better. I mean, somebody do the math for me. It's been forever since Georgia had a halftime lead against a Power 4 opponent. That's crazy. That's crazy. So Savannah Bryan, who obviously called some of the Braves struggles, did Brian Snitker retire? Is that out? Is that out? Okay, so Brian Snitker has retired as Braves manager. Let me just say this. I certainly understand why a lot of people believe it was time for this to happen, and probably was, just to be honest with you. I am a very big Brian Snitker fan. In professional sports in the city of Atlanta, which is where I happen to be sitting right now, professional sports in the city of Atlanta, I think that Brian Snitker is the number 2 coach/manager in the history of this city. Obviously, Bobby Cox is one. The Atlanta Falcons have never had a coach who I would put in the same category of Brian Snitker. For the way he did it, for what he did, Bobby Cox has a statue outside Truist Park with good reason. I think that Brian Snitker should get a statue outside Truist Park. The same way Alabama, for all of its fictitious national championships, has a statue for all those coaches in their Monument Park area. The Braves should give Brian Snitker a statue. I think that Brian Snitker is the second best coach/manager in Atlanta sports history. I do. In Atlanta sports history, I'm saying.
The details on it. He's actually will transition to an advisory role within the organization for the 2026 season, which will be his 50th with the Braves organization. 811 wins, 6 NL East division crowns, 7 postseason berths. Also, of course, the World Series in 2021.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
he's up there.
Yeah, so to me, I feel a little bit about Snitker the way that I feel about Sam Pittman. Some of the stuff I said about Sam Pittman online, and y'all, we have got to go. I'm literally going to get fired for talking too long. I said Pittman becoming the Arkansas coach in itself was an accomplishment. I feel the same way about Brian Snitker. As Cody just eloquently rattled off, a Braves lifer, a Braves bedrock employee, really, before he became known as a coach and manager, things like that. This was a bedrock Braves employee who became a World Series winning manager and really restored the Braves to greatness after the organization had taken a bit of a dip 10 years ago or so. They'd taken a dip. They had some problems. GM got fired, for instance. This was not a model franchise for a brief moment. And Snitker turned all that around. I'm a very, very big fan of Brian Snitker, full stop. And I believe he is among the greats in Atlanta sports history. I'd like to see his number retired. I'd like to see him get a statue. He won a championship in Atlanta that puts him in pretty rarefied company. So we would say well-earned retirement. Major League Manager is different than it used to be. A lot of Major League Managers don't really do anything anymore. So I don't know exactly what Atlanta will be looking for. Obviously, guys who have ties to this organization have also recently lost their employment too. So do the Braves go down a route like that? I'm talking about Ron Washington or something like that. I don't know. I really don't. Most teams seem to hire a button pusher that does whatever the analytics department tells them to do. Maybe that's what the Braves do as well. Managers just different than it once was. Back in my day, managers of these sort of swashbuckling cowboy types, they're not quite that way anymore. So I don't know what kind of managers the Braves want. I know that the Giants supposedly have kicked the tires on Tony Vitello, the Tennessee baseball coach. I don't know that I could stomach that in Atlanta, but that's at least an interesting thing to consider. Do you go with the firebrand? That's the opposite of what the more stately and genteel Snitker had been. I don't know. But it will be interesting. A managerial search for the Braves is a big deal because of the following that the organization has. So with that, we are going to shut up. I'm going to rest my voice, and I'm going to see you back tomorrow. Now, also, I am back today on the R.S. Andrews Go with the Flow, which I'm looking forward to. We'll make some picks. Maybe my picks will start getting better here at some point if I am able to speak, so that'll be good. But you'll find them online, rsandrews.com. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric, showing up on time, doing the work that's promised, the price is promised, including if you have a plumbing emergency, they'll take care of that for you today. So make sure you check it out. Also, see you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management. We'll look forward to talking to you then.